Welcome to Keeping Up with Trends. This is Fed Razak, Senior Trading Strategist here at CMTrading, and we're joined with your host, Sergio Davids, a
Yeah, man.
special podcast. Got lots of things to discuss. What's on the top of the list?
Well, it's earnings season, and some of the world's top companies are releasing their, quarterly reports, giving us lots of opportunities to trade. I really enjoy earnings season. There's something about just seeing how, some of the companies and brands that you follow, just seeing how they're doing and seeing how the market reacts always excites me.
It's action.
So, yeah, I've got this fascination over over earnings season. I think it was one of our first podcasts where we're discussing, as basic as it is, what is a share. And for me, it's always a case of I don't think people realize that you can own a piece of Tesla, Google, Microsoft, Meta. Yes, some of these shares are super expensive, but it is attainable. I
And
mean, you would never think that you could own a piece of some of these giant companies.
it becomes even more realistic when the company does well and they issue dividends.
Yeah.
And there are some companies, their stock doesn't go up so much. I think it's like
Mm.
Philip Morris, which is a company like that. Because it's a tobacco company, it doesn't always
Yeah.
get the best um, PR.
Yeah.
Because I mean, let's face it. There
Yeah.
is it was a very big scandal in the
Yeah, I remember. 80s
early
and
2000s,
90s.
late 90s. It was under scrutiny. Guys, talk about another opportunity lost. I
Mm.
remember Philip Morris was trading at $19.
$19. Wow.
Yeah, it went that far down, and a friend of mine started saying, maybe it's a good idea to buy it, trade it. And I said, you know what? I had some extra money and I bought 1,000 shares of it. And the next day it went up to like 2021 and he jiggled me out of it. He's like, I didn't think you were going to buy 1,000 shares of it. And then I got out. Little did I
Oh,
know, you know, another one that got away,
jeez. Jeez.
but they pay like
Yeah.
10% dividend.
Well, that's amazing.
They, yeah,
That's consistent value for shareholders.
right.
So yeah, I thought we could talk about the three big companies that are going to be releasing their earnings on October 24th, and they are Microsoft, Google, and Coca-Cola. But before we kick things off, I read a story today that global shares have hit 7 month lows on October 23rd. Some of the reasons they're citing is the conflict in the Middle East and the prospect of, another long stretch of high interest rates. So what's going on, man?
So, in his last Powell, in his last what was it, meeting minutes, he
Yeah.
said higher longer, which is not very encouraging for the market, which means that
No,
interest rates are going to be higher and they're going to be higher for a longer
for
period of
longer.
time.
Right.
Until he gets that, inflation in check at 2%, he's not taking any chances. And that's why the Fed is tied down to these higher interest rates. The Middle East, yeah, there's stuff going on there,
Yeah.
but that's not the underlining, factor for the markets to sell off. The real
Mhm.
factor for the markets to sell off is number one, lack of direction, whether or not we're out of recession.
Right.
Um, even when we're out of recession, until it still takes time for us to bounce back into an expansion kind of economic atmosphere. So, yeah. So, if you're not knowing when you're getting out of a recession or you're just in a situation where you're stuck, um, that's the situation we find ourselves right now. That the Fed can't do the next stage because they don't know for sure that things have been, kind of bottled up.
Mm.
So they have to make sure, number one, that things are bottled up, and then they'd be able to make more rational, decisions as to how to break down that very high interest rate.
Talking about bouncing back, Bitcoin, pushed beyond 30K.
Yep.
after being languishing, 26K and below. And, when was it? About a year ago when, you know, the economy was also a bit, dicey and we saw Bitcoin, climb. Is this indicative of, bad things to come or a lot more volatility?
So it's interesting that Bitcoin has become the um, the safe haven investment in times where there are so much uncertainty in the markets.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
And-
it used to be gold, isn't it?
right, but if you remember what happened in COVID, in
Yeah.
Corona,
Yeah,
everybody
gold
went
shot.
everybody went to everybody went to everybody went to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was super popular. But the same thing happened with gold and then it just crashed. I mean, I remember reading predictions that gold would go up to 3,000. I mean,
Yeah,
gold hasn't been, not performing in the last few weeks. I mean, it's up to what, 1970, which
yeah.
is
So it's
pretty good.
almost at $2,000.
So once again, I remember, you always say that, in times of volatility, people go to, safe haven assets. So gold going up, crypto going up, is that all tied to a bit of a, bad situation with global economy?
I think it's just uncertainty. I don't think it's bad situation. Bad situation would be, a depression. And I
Yeah.
think economists today, at least in the developing countries in the world, have learned how to um, s- make a recipe for a
Right.
successful economy, in spite of the fact that we're not uh, in an economy that necessarily is producing some, double returns.
Mm,
And that's part of the cycle. Um, the US over the past, I don't know, the 30 years that I've been watching the markets, has continuously done the same thing. There's a point of expansion where interest rates are really low, businesses are flourishing, people are spending more money than they uh, have, which is
yeah.
okay because they're able to cover it. And then, comes a time of some sort of adversity, whether it was the Gulf War or whether it was the Iraq War, whether it was September 11th,
Afghanistan.
whatever the adversity was.
Right.
And then the markets constricted, and interest rates started going a little bit higher, but it was always in check. Everything was in check. And then 2, 3 years down the line, kind of opened up. Markets kind of opened up, and something new came into the market.
Okay.
And
Yep.
And so this cycle has been happening for over, I would say, 50 to 60 years, from World War II, really, which
Mm,
might even be a little bit longer than that. But all I'm saying is that right now we're not leading that path. We're leading a path of very high inflation, which we saw in the 1980s, which kind of questions me with, things going back to the way it was before 1980s between the United States and the Russia. Okay,
yeah.
and in those days it was the USSR. So it's kind of interesting. It's very nostalgic. It's like as if we, the past, I don't know, 30 years we, came out of the Cold War, and now we're backtracking to the Cold War, and the
Yeah.
same circumstances around that are
Yeah.
recreating. The financial markets have like recreated the same situation that we were in the 1980s. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's it's funny how you say that because we really have gone full circle again, with the standoffish relationship with Russia and Russia's, military aggression, especially in, Europe again. So, yeah, it's a strange time. But, there are opportunities and, like I said in the beginning of the segment, earnings season. So, what are your thoughts on Microsoft? I mean, they've been consistent performer since 2019 and even more so, of late, what with the boom in gaming and AI.
So Microsoft is, it's not going anywhere. It's
Too
one
big
of
to
those
fail.
too big to fail. If they fail, the United States fails. It's
Well,
it's
that's a
that
good thing.
It's that integrated into the very fabric of, American, whatever you want to call it, culture,
Yeah, yeah. I
fabric
think
of society.
it's probably as American as our other brand we're going to talk about, Coca-Cola. You
Yeah,
know,
it's
it's just
it's iconic.
synonymous with tech. Yeah,
It's really what Bill Gates has to leave behind. Although his personal life wasn't successful, his professional life, his legacy, and what he
yeah,
created and put together is something of magnificence. And we know whether you like him as a personal person or
yeah.
not. That's another story. But um, I I just they're situated in such a good way that they may not go back to their stratosphere uh, area that they were trading at. However, they have revenue coming in on a consistent basis. Their current users are consistent basis. Their big government contracts that they have in the United States are pending and ongoing. So I'm not really concerned about that. A few years ago, they signed a $1 billion deal with the U.S. government. Uh, I'd like to see what that salesperson got on his commission
What the
that month.
commission is, yeah. Wow.
1 billion bucks with the United States, and it
Jeez.
was over a period of maybe 10 years or something like that. That they would provide the infrastructure for their networks and all that. So so they're situated in a really good place. Now the question is whether or not AI is going to start kicking in with that investment.
Yeah. Well, they're investing heavily, much like every other brand into AI. And what that's going to look like still remains to be seen, but I think it's going to happen a lot sooner than we think.
I
I
don't know.
mean,
So
I've seen, just with Microsoft alone, I've seen this demo of an AI for, Microsoft's Office suite. So you could tell an AI, please type an email to, Susan and attach an Excel spreadsheet to it and also message her on Teams. It's this entire, Microsoft, Office ecosystem that the
right.
AI will have access to. Kind of like having your own, Office assistant. I mean, I don't know if you remember the days of Clippy, um, that paperclip word assistant. So we've we've come a long way from just this animated GIF that you could type things to now having this organic AI assistant that has access to everything you have, in your work life.
See, to me that what you just triggered me. I don't know if you ever remember this, but in the 1980s, like early 80s, it was Apple against Microsoft,
Yeah, yeah.
and there was
And
a
IBM.
and IBM, and there was this one advertisement that Apple came out that played on the Super Bowl,
Right.
where this attractive young lady who has a sledgehammer is walking into a board meeting where it's like as if Big Brother is talking on the big screen, and she takes this huge hammer and she throws it against it because this person who's talking to the audience, you could Google this. It's really a
Yeah, yeah.
fascinating. It's also context
Yeah.
because 1984, which is the book by George Orwell,
Yeah.
which discussed like there's always like this
Big
government that's
brother.
controlling, right, Big Brother that's controlling, the people, and this was a an offshoot of that on a visual um, as something visually that people can see. And Apple was like this girl who's coming with this sledgehammer, who's breaking the um, this screen, and basically that they're breaking the foundation of government controlling you. Now you tell me that Microsoft has access to your teams, and
Yep.
they have access to your email, and they
Yep.
like, so he's just substituted one big brother for another
For
big
another,
brother,
yep.
and
And
that's
we don't
exactly
even know how intrusive it is. Look, I'm not even gonna get into the whole, your phone's constantly listening to you. That's a whole other, kettle of
I
fish. So
really
let's
I'm convinced that it does because I have a
Yeah, it does.
conversation.
And specifically Instagram.
Oh, I don't use
Unashamedly
Instagram on my phone.
listening to you, yeah.
But
I
all
used
of a
to do.
sudden, I talk about ice
Huh?
cream, and I get a pop up on ice cream. It's with my wife, and then all of a sudden we get.
I used to do this. Uh, I had a um guest lecture um gig at University of Stellenbosch in Cape Town. And one of these things I used to do was I used to ask students to Google a term or a word, right? And we put it up on the screen. We see what results they get just from Google, right? So I remember this one time I'd visit Australia. So Australia is on my mind, and I typed in kangaroo, and I told two other students to do the same thing, right? So the first result for all three of us was the same. It's a Wikipedia article on what is a kangaroo. Okay, that makes sense, right? The next three results for me was where to view kangaroos in Darwin, because that's where I visited. And then it was history of kangaroos and Australia, because I'm always looking up historical things. And just before I went to Australia and Darwin, I looked it up. The next student, his results was singles in Australia, where to meet a woman in Australia, even though he had typed in kangaroo. The third guy, his second and third results were how to hunt, best legal way to hunt kangaroos, cooking recipes for kangaroo meat.
So
So
based
we
on the
all
profile,
just based on their profile, we all searched the same term, but why did we get different results?
interesting,
That's weird.
interesting.
Anyway, moving on. Next company we've got on our list for earnings season is Google. Now, Google suffered, much like all the other big tech companies on the big tech crash of 2022. In fact, they missed every one of their earnings in that year. From April all the way to February this year. They've had back-to-back good earnings, but it's quite telling when, Google, this, like you said, too big to fail company, suffers an entire year of, bad quarterly reports. What are your thoughts on them?
So I mean, Google's another one. It's not going anywhere. Yeah, their technology is. I see them as having less vision than Microsoft does. Um, they've made some good purchases in the past.
Yeah.
The question is, how could they align it a little bit better? Meaning, since YouTube was bought by them, they
Mm.
haven't made so many huge acquisitions that have expanded their revenue to
Well,
where it is
that's the
today.
big thing. Their number one way of getting revenue is through ads. And you've seen how aggressive YouTube has been with stopping you from using ad blocker on your own PC. It's still their number one ad generator. And I always wondered why Google wasn't as quick on the ball when it came to AI. But that also makes sense because their model is they got to get you to click on those links, right?
Right.
Whereas an AI like ChatGPT just bypasses that completely. And if your business model is supplying links to people, search terms and then links to people, and there's a company that bypasses that, that's a bit dangerous. And right now, their AI bot, I mean, it's good. It's a lot better than what it was when it first released. It's good, but it still requires you to click on links. So they can't get around their own business model.
Well, I think it's just going to take them a matter of time. I think
Yeah.
they're. I don't. I don't see them disappearing anytime soon. And
Mm,
the question is, how much market share and how much
yeah.
complementary type of products could they come up with that doesn't. You know, being in five different businesses is all nice and dandy,
Yeah.
but if it cripples you from making more money but just focusing on your own business, then that's crippling.
Mm,
So they have to really keep in mind on how to really focus on their main products and add at the same time add corporations that will only um, add value to their organization.
And finally, another American company that's as American as apple pie, Coca-Cola. You know, they haven't had a bad. I can't even call it bad. I mean, they missed earnings slightly back in 2020, and that was the first time in about a decade. You know, it's just a company that consistently performs, and I think it's amazing considering what we've been through. You know, I would have thought back in 2020 when COVID hit, you know, they lost a lot of commercial clients, specifically movie theaters, and yet that didn't slow them down at all. And
Well, their
even to this
business.
day, yep,
I mean, their company is not just Coca-Cola products, right? So they're very well positioned in terms of the diversity of products that they provide.
yeah. And the brand is just as strong as ever.
Oh my gosh! I mean, that's
Like,
it.
and
Coca's
no matter
it.
where you go, you know, it's very telling. No matter where you go in the world, you'll see a Coca-Cola sign. It's just
Um,
so synonymous with, you know, refreshment and, you know, it's crazy. I mean, I've traveled a lot, you know, in Africa as well, and it doesn't matter if you're in a tiny village or in the jungle in Thailand and you spot that sign. Just brand strength and brand value of Coca-Cola, and I don't think it's going anywhere.
it's around
I
the
can't. I,
globe.
in fact, I can't even imagine a situation where it would.
That's
You know?
exactly why Warren Buffett invested in it.
Yeah.
He said it himself. He said, if tomorrow you have a atomic bomb and the
Right.
world goes to rubble, what would be the type of companies that would be able to set up quickest and the most the fastest ones to bounce back? And he said Coca Cola, and that was his criteria for investing in Coca Cola.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I guess, you know, we've spoken about some major companies. Once again, I'll ask you, how do we go about trading during earnings season?
So I don't like going into a number with a position. I would wait
Right.
for the number to come out, kind of see how the markets are reacting. We're at a very specific threshold at the bottom of a range for both the Nasdaq and the Dow Jones, which there could be some downside risk if we don't sustain what we are right now. We could fall further down. So
Yeah.
or sell off further in the market. So with that said, just be aware. Just be
Well,
aware.
okay. I know, you know, you don't like taking a position beforehand, but, you know, excluding Google, which has had, you know, back-to-back poor earning reports, Microsoft and Google, too big to fail. You know, they've had one bad quarter between the two of them, right, in the past 6 years. So would it not be fair to say that once again they're going to be, you know, meeting those goals, share price going to go up? So wouldn't it be prudent to trade a position, you know, ahead of time?
No, because you don't know whether or not it's been factored in.
Okay.
And that's the
Okay.
biggest issue when you're trading the financial markets. And we saw that just a month ago when Nvidia came out with its earning reports, and
Yeah.
you were convinced to buy it, and I told you don't,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you don't know what it beat everything. It guided higher,
Yeah.
but you don't know if it's factored in already. So you have to
Okay.
take that into consideration.
Fair enough. And I think on that note, we'll leave it there. Thank you, Fred, for all your awesome trading advice.
Thank you, Sergio.
Awesome. I'll see you on the next one, man.
You got it.
Okay. Bye.